If we lose the Internet Archive, we're screwed. I know the government has viewed certain companies as too big to fail because of the negative financial impact we would experience if they were to do so. I wonder if there needs to be a cultural equivalent, where a repository of digital or physical artifacts is too big to fail because of the negative cultural impact their failure would have. In the absence of that, anyone who sees high cultural value to the preservation of these digital artifacts should counterintuitively not treat the Internet Archive as having some special status, but should treat it as a liability. It has become the custodian of too much, and too much is on the line if it fails. Rather than trying to constantly shore up the IA so it can't fail financially, we should be looking at ways to preserve those artifacts redundantly, so that even if the IA fails, it's not a calamity.
I know the government has viewed certain companies as too big to fail because of the negative financial impact we would experience if they were to do so. I wonder if there needs to be a cultural equivalent where a repository of digital or physical artifacts is too big to fail because of the negative cultural impact their failure would have. If there is, the Internet Archive isn't it? Yeah, it's super important in certain weird technology and library subcultures, but few people outside of them would even notice it if it disappeared. If they shut down, the story wouldn't even be able to muscle its way onto the front page of the New York Times. It would lose to whatever the latest Trump drama is, and the North repetition of the standard mass shooting media package. In the absence of that, anyone who sees high cultural value to the preservation of these digital artifacts should, counterintuitively, not treat the Internet Archive as having some special status, but should treat it as a liability. It has become the custodian of too much, and too much is on the line if it fails. Rather than trying to constantly shore up the IA so it can't fail financially, we should be looking at ways to preserve those artifacts redundantly, so that even if the IA fails, it's not a calamity. Yeah, especially since the Internet Archive, as an organization, has proven itself to be irresponsible. Lots of people want to turn the publishers into the villains, for ideological reasons, as well as a bias towards the Internet Archive. But it's the IA that fucked up here. They imperiled their core mission for some unnecessary grandstanding. They either need to fire whatever lawyers okayed the emergency library, or the leaders that refused to listen to sane legal advice, telling them not to do it.
Greater than I wonder if there needs to be a cultural equivalent where a repository of digital or physical artifacts is too big to fail because of the negative cultural impact their failure would have. You can wonder all you like and call me a cynic, but the US runs on money, not culture. The American identity is built on money and wealth and excess, not on anything you might describe as culture. The ER would not fail if it was just left alone. But business never saw a nickel they didn't want to grab, so the lawsuits are not exactly surprising. And I expect the courts to lean towards the publishers.
Copyright law needs to change. Back in the day, a copyright measured in decades made sense, because it took that long to promote and distribute a work, and derive reasonable profit from it. Today that process takes days, maybe months, apart from the rare work that languishes, only to be discovered later. Copyright should be much shorter, a couple years at most, with renewal available if the creator really believes the work has yet to find its audience. The standard for abandoned works still protected under the existing system should default against the potential holder of the original copyright, as long as a good faith effort was made to reach them, and damages should amount to some sort of split of the profits.
I don't think I agree with this. Novels can take years to write, and to have their copyright expire after only a few years may not be enough for the author to write another book. What would be the motivation to write a series if the series isn't worth printing after only a few books? It goes doubly if the novel might be up for a movie or a TV adaptation. The Game of Thrones TV adaptation didn't happen until much later after the first book. Does this mean George R.R. Martin should be paid zero, while HBO makes a killing on the first few seasons? How would any artist retire ever if they cannot make money off their existing body of work?
The title implies that losing this lawsuit is threatening the existence of the Internet Archive. Is that really the case? If it is true, then maybe IA should be run by somebody with better judgment. This was a project with a massive chance of failure. How could anyone think that this wasn't just blatantly infringing? And a low payoff? If it's also an existential risk, then WTF are they doing running it?
Frankly, what the EA did here is absolutely the right thing. Copyright in the US is horribly fundamentally broken, and the idea that factual information about our history and world should not be referenceable and accessible for free is a pretty heinous one. Information wants to be free, and the work that IA did for digital lending during the pandemic was an essential move in the direction of ensuring that people can access this information, regardless of their physical proximity, and access to the base source material. I don't understand the backlash in the comments here. It seems to all come from a perspective of people being so downtrodden, they just accept the current status quo, crafted by AFIA lawyers, rather than looking at it holistically from first principles.
We already have laws for historical landmarks. These laws ensure the protection of things of societal significance, even to the point of restricting the rights of their private owners. We need such laws for the digital realm. If we had them, we wouldn't have to worry about Internet Archive, preview, etc. Imagine if we had such laws in place long ago. We could be living in a world where GeoCities and MySpace still existed, even if only in a read-only form.
Why should tax dollars be used for this?
Which made copyrighted books available for free during the COVID-19 pandemic. The publishers behind the lawsuit alleged that this entailed copyright infringement. Along with everybody with two brain cells to rub together. We all screamed, "Hey, you idiots are going to ruin everything if you act like the pandemic has magically nullified the concept of copyright." And they fucking did it anyway. And now exactly what we said would happen is happening. It's like you found a landmine in your front yard, and your buddy said, "That landmine shouldn't be there, so I'm gonna go step on it." And you told him not to, and then had to watch him throw himself onto it, or declaring it would be morally wrong for it to blow his stupid ass up. Controlled digital lending had a chance of getting off the ground. The IA's Emergency Library's unlimited digital lending burned it to the ground and stomped on the ashes.
They're not in court for the emergency library. They're in court for the 1/1 CDL lending they did. I'm tired of seeing this, "Well, IA shouldn't have done the emergency library" line. Do you honestly believe the only reason publishers went after IA is the emergency library? I think this would have happened eventually, so pointing to the emergency library does nothing but tell everyone that you were right all along. They operate in a country where precedent is set in a court of law. How did you expect CDL to get off the ground, if not challenged in a court of law?
I'm tired of seeing this, "Well, I shouldn't have done the emergency library" line. I appreciate that. However, as a long-time regular, sustaining financial benefactor of IA, I was annoyed that they strayed into this set of activities in the first place, and then dismayed when they pushed the envelope on it during C-19 quarantines. I and others predicted this trouble, and even if there is not direct causation, why do they have to tickle this dragon in the first place?
I keep seeing this really bad take repeated on this site in the absence of more nuanced, informed legal opinions. Whether CDL is legal under fair use or not is legally unresolved. Whether it's legally permissible to copy a printed material and distribute that copy as though it were the printed material is unresolved. Lots of organizations have been skating along under one interpretation of fair use as a workaround for the burdensome licensing fees and absurd lending limits that publishers expect libraries to pay. Libraries being, super well funded by that VC honey and all. And it's not like publishers get less litigious over time. Whether the NEL prompted this or not is irrelevant. It was going to be tested, and IA are exactly the right organization to test it. And it wasn't going to become more legal if everyone just kept doing the same thing, but more quietly. Now that it's being tested, the right thing to do is to figure out if CDL is something we as a society want to enable for our libraries or not.